We are live. Hopefully people start trickling in. Is it already up on Twitter?
I have no idea. What a fascinating thing.
It is pretty fascinating. All right, yeah, look at us. Oh, this is odd. I'm looking at the Twitter and there's me just moments ago picking my mustache. All right, well, do we want to put a little graphic up as we see if people show up?
Yeah, for sure.
Bro.
Let's have some
Hell
fun
yeah.
with it.
That's
Are like comments gonna come in here?
All right. Well, that was a delightful little introduction. Hello to everybody watching. Got a couple people on Twitter, maybe some others elsewhere. My name is Max Cohen. I'm the lead writer at the Museum of Crypto Art. I hope you can hear me. Joining me today, as I suspect and greatly hope he will, every week, is the founder of the Museum of Crypto Art, Coburn Bell. How we doing, man?
I'm great. It's good to be here. Thanks for putting all this together. This looks fun.
You're very welcome. We have a couple live streams going on YouTube, on Twitter, on Twitch. If you're watching, we're so happy to have you here. If you click the link and follow us to Restream, I believe we got a chat going. So we invite you to come on in, say hi. We're just gonna shoot the shit about crypto art for the next half hour, 40 minutes. So we're very happy to have you here, Coburn. What's on your mind?
Oh man, I go through waves. Like I look at it now and I just don't see the same thing that it was when it started. And I'm just so curious as to like what the point is, what the zeitgeist is, like where is the art now?
Are you talking about just crypto art or the whole kind of NFT ecosystem?
I mean, maybe even the whole ecosystem, period, right? Because I guess this story goes back, right? It goes back to like cryptocurrencies, the ICO boom. Is what is this all chugging to, and what is really like the sustainable nature of it? I think we've proven that we can have like bootstrap markets, that we can create this fervor, and I guess change is meant to be incremental and not exponential, and I really wish change could be exponential.
Well, I think it's so interesting because I think that we are in such a weird space that has no clear primary area of interest, right? Whether it's finance with an art inflection or whether it's art with a financial inflection, right? Because I think it's kind of self-defeatist to ask, where is this going with an art movement, right? As far as I am aware, at least for the last 100 years, right, since like the modernist era, like art movements just kind of flow one into the other, right? I guess the point is like self-sustainment, but I'm not sure if we are in this new paradigm, right, where it's a financially motivated market that happens to be about art, or that the like financial aspects, which I think is what you're referring to, and correct me if I'm wrong, is subsidiary to the art, in which case, how can we predict where it goes? It could only self-sustain, right?
the art in the beginning was more indicative of like the collective power of all those artists together, right? And then once money came into the equation, it became incredibly individualistic, right? And then everybody's meta, instead of experimenting like on their own, was just to follow whatever trend was the latest thing, right? If it
So
was like,
yeah.
go ahead, yeah, please.
No, I was just saying, like, let me ask you for posterity's sake, when you first came into the space, or first started getting involved here, like, who were the artists that were controlling the zeitgeist? I think we could probably name a few of them today, but I'm just curious, in your opinion, who was like vocally, there leading the charge as this thing kind of grew?
Yeah, I mean, you can find a lot of the people on the artist council of the museum, right? Like Sarah Zucker, Matt Kane, Hackatow, um, I like Fabien Rashid, Arc4G. I don't, I just don't see these voices any more as much.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that is like a Twitter problem. I don't know if the thing has kind of become so fractured. Um, Robness and Max kind of on like this outsider uh art element, and really just pushing more of like the wild spirit of it. Uh it it was perhaps like more segmented and logical, and now I don't know. There's no direction. I find it lacks direction.
Well, I think that that's an interesting grouping of artists that you mentioned, right? Because you add like Miss L. Simpson or Coldy into that mix, and it's all
For
these artists
sure.
who have very, very distinct styles, right? Um, and I think even this many years later, what, 4 or 5 years later, you can probably pick up all of those artists or pick them out. If you just saw a glut of artwork in front of you, you would know which was Sarah Zucker, know which was Robness, right? Know which was
Mm.
Coldy or Arc4G. And I think it's much more difficult now because there's nobody who doesn't have imitators, right? X Copy might have been the first person doing, glitch in a big time way, or among the first, but now, there's 1,000 people, 1,000 artists who are all very talented, very competent, right? And maybe that's the rub, right? Is there's so much competence that is following in these pathways that these original artists, made out for themselves. It's so hard to tell where it's going to go, at least aesthetically.
And I mean, those artists are incredibly commercially successful, right? It's really sad when it's like the value begins to accrue into like the aesthetic and style that is derivative of somebody who kind of like pioneered it and really brought it forward.
Mhm.
I have an issue with that, right? It doesn't, the market does not incentivize people like going out and developing it. It incentivizes people kind of like following trends. Like even after Beeple, it was just like a massive, massive wave of just like 3D art, 3D art, 3D art, all in the same style.
Mhm. Well, I guess that's like the natural way of things, I suppose. I know a bit about art history, but not enough to know, who was the first surrealist or who was the first abstract expressionist. But I would have to imagine that, after Pollock started splattering paint, that there was tons of imitators. I think some of the things that I so love about this space, especially as like somebody who's still recently and newly acquainted with it, right? Like its accessibility, for instance, and right, the accessibility of the tools it provides. Being able to create digital artwork is a lot more accessible to a lot more people than a Jackson Pollock, where you would need the paint, you would need the canvas, you would need the room to experiment, you would need the middleman, the gallerist,
Hmm.
you would need the exhibitionist interest, right? But what you have with that accessibility is just a deluge of everything, right? I mean, that's partially, I think, influenced by the fact that crypto art's on Twitter, but it must also be just the nature of the art making, right?
I think it's just the nature of the times, right? Attention spans are incredibly scattered. People are constantly moving from one thing to the next. Um, the ability to rapidly learn things is very accessible, right? So you can try and like you can work backwards on styles. You can work backwards on people's algorithms, their codes, how they do things, their practice, um, to the point where there is like no almost like master of anything anymore because somebody just like comes up immediately under it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that one of the things, and again, correct me if you're wrong, but one of the things I'm hearing you kind of infer is, you know, having the financial aspect of this market be unpredictable, and also like we can't really escape the market makers. And where do we go when these market makers have a very set idea of who they want to promote and what values they want to promote? But when you have so much artwork, some tastemaker is going to come in and say, for whatever reason, this is better than all the rest, this is worth more money than all the rest, and that's inevitably going to lead taste in a certain direction.
We saw a lot of that, man, and we saw a lot of artists, I think, suffer because of that, right? Because kind of once you pop, if it's not sustainable, the only place left to go is down. And I think that was a big mistake. There's not enough. I was talking with Magnus Reisch about this. There's like not enough history. There's not enough known about these individuals that, people, there are very few speculators in the art market, right? Like the collectors that are there to make an investment, right? They trust their advisors. They trust that there is like a network of people that is going to like support and prop these things up, and those support systems don't really exist for artists in this space yet. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's really difficult when like the artist is given that expectation and they don't have a team of people behind them, like supporting the marketing, telling people about their work, telling people why their work is incredible. And once you kind of like take off, I think that's why we've seen so few artists mint like no new work.
Well, I think that goes into the question, or something I'm interested in talking about, which I don't think we've discussed, is the open edition phenomenon that we're kind of seeing at the moment, where, from a very momentary perspective, from my perspective at least, and I'm never like super cash flush, but I love the opportunity to own stuff by these collectors. But there seems to be a lot of discussion about the long-term effects on careers, on finances, on the space that these open editions are, essentially like promising down the road. I mean, what do you think? What do you make of this whole trend?
I mean, look, I've from the day Nifty Gateway introduced it, I thought it was an incredibly dirty mechanism, because like, how does this, unless there is unless like we achieve it and there is this incredible democratization of art and people are so hungry for the past, but the fact of the matter is like we just keep adding more and more and more and more content. Like, do I believe Ethereum is going to be here? Yes. And I believe it so much that I think Ethereum could be $10,000. It could be, so whatever price you're paying in Ethereum for that thing at that time is always going to be the high water mark. So as far as an investment, that is like got to be worse odds than a scratch off.
Well, I think everything here that we play with has bad odds in perpetuity, right? Or at least in the long term, just because it's such a crapshoot. I mean, I think about all these art movements of the past, right? And just the names that have stood the test of time, right? I think about this a lot, but like Dali is the surrealist painter that most people know. He wasn't the only surrealist painter. There were, there's the one that everybody knows, the say 7 that maybe most, art people know. And then there's hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of imitators who their work, whatever arbitrary metrics of quality we use to look at them, to, qualify them, they could be great, they could be not great, but they were still making artwork around this time, and probably in the same vein, probably in the same cultural centers, the Parises of the world, in the 20s and 30s. And yet historical importance kind of coalesces into a dozen figures, and really into like 2 or 3. So in terms of, the 10-year time horizon of crypto art, what we're doing right now, I even see it in kind of the language that a lot of the big collectors will use in trying to bolster the importance of the artist they're collecting against what is essentially like the ravaging force of time, right? That is going to just come in and cut everyone off at the knees, and it's impossible to know who's going to be tallest. Would it be, the Claire Silvers, the X copies, the, DK motions, potentially all or any of them, but totally unpredictable, right? We have no idea what 10 years from now the stylistic importance of this movement is going to be, whether people will even care about the style or whether it will just kind of coalesce into the importance of minting, whether the mocha idea of preserving these early artists, whether that will be borne out or whether that will be totally forgotten.
And you bring up a lot of good points. It's frankly, there's like, I have no basis to begin to even assess like the technical quality of the art, and frankly, I'm not even sure if that matters, and I'm not really sure what matters. What was really, really nice in the beginning is that you had like more artists collecting other artists, which was a truer signal as to kind of like the respect that they would show each other, and that was something you could very much like follow on. I think that was a much better indicator of how an artist would do and progress and be perceived than like which collectors they had collected, right? But there is for sure an ego about the collector, an arrogance that when they go like kind of spouting these things online, to me it feels very hollow. It actually turns me off to the artists a lot of the time.
So let me ask you a couple questions, because I think that when you and I talk, when the Mocha team talks, even in a chat like this, there's a distance, it feels to me, between yourself and these other collectors. When, in terms of just collection, right? How many months have you been the number one collector on Super Rare?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. At least a year
A
and
few.
a half. Yeah.
And yet you are very cagey about the work that you collect. You don't do the promotion that I think a lot of these other collectors do of the work that they're collecting, unless you really love it. So I'm wondering, when you're collecting in this kind of market, or just over the last year or so, right, where there's so much artwork, what catches your eye?
That's what I'm saying, man. I've lost the plot.
Mm.
It's there are some things like, the my OpenSea history is public. It's not like I'm collecting anywhere else. But I don't know. Everything seems expensive. Like when I started, everything was, I collected 300 pieces on Super Rare for like an average price of $300. So now everything just feels expensive.
Well, I mean, when you find an artwork, is it because you're attracted to the artist, because you have a relationship with the artist? Is it purely aesthetics?
No, and it's rarely aesthetics, actually.
Mm.
It's rarely aesthetics. It is about like the whole package, right? It's about who that person is, like what they're representing, their commitment to this. I still think the most important thing in all of this is like the expression of individual sovereignty and creativity, and somebody that is like pushing the limits and is being very fearless. And I want to like be right alongside that person who is leading that. I'm not really looking for like the most technically accomplished person right now, because that's when you start to play with big numbers, and that is entirely speculative.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think it's the sweetest thing in the world to like be there first with somebody and give them that chance and say that like you are seen. Your art might be considered outside by most people, but really it should be inside. And I think that's what the message here needs to be, is that there are like more valid forms of creativity, of self-expression, of like individuality that we get to express and share, like even outside of, I think the market should 100% be secondary to like the act of creation, like the signing of the mint, like the ownership that this is the thing that you've done. Somehow the market became the message, when really there's like an incredible power, and this is something that you've created and you're putting it like to the internet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I wonder, as I think we all wonder, and I think our opinions probably change in this all the time, but when we're talking about investing in art based on these ambiguous metrics, right? When the technical brilliance is not the exclusive, mm, maker of the market, right? Who's more responsible for the directions of the market, and who's more responsible for the individual achievement of any given artist? I hate this idea that like all this stuff has to go onto the artist, and I love the idea that the collectors of art have some hand in making sure that the artists they're collecting have a lengthy career, although even that has these kind of more overt investment connotations that I kind of shiver at.
Yeah, I mean, it's just finite. Like the money is finite, the attention span is finite, and it's really, where I am right now is like synthesize, distill, 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 like try and get to the point. And am I going to sit here and say like any individual artist here is more important than anybody else? No, like I was interested in the broader return of like economic rights and sovereignty to this group of people. And that seems to have happened, right? But do I really want to go and start like picking and choosing? No, I don't personally think I'm qualified. Right. And I think that any collector now that says they're qualified to like begin to make that determination, I can point you to pockets that I think are like pure brilliance and pure genius. And it's unlike anything that I've ever seen before. And I know like when having a conversation with people who are doubtful that might be in the art world, like places to begin to show them that like speak to real artistry and like real mastery and something that is very unique to the medium and could only be expressed here.
What was the first artwork you ever collected? At least crypto artwork,
It
rather.
was well, I mean, outside of like the work I was collecting on Additional, it was a Miss Al Simpson piece. It was called Lady Luck.
Mm. What attracted you to it?
Inexplicable. I have no idea. I have
Sure.
no idea what possibly compelled me to buy it.
Mhm.
It's like a lady in a fedora lounging on like a glitched background.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I love Miss L. Simpson's work, but I think she's indicative.
It's a tough place for your internet to cut out.
Yeah, so sorry. That's just gonna happen every 20 minutes for
That's
the rest of my
well,
life, I guess.
yeah. What were you saying? I love her too.
Yeah, I
Uh,
love her work, but I think that they're these artists, right, that exist in these little pockets. I think you mentioned them, right? Like Fabien Rashid, I think Arc 4G, I think like Norman Harriman, Miss Al Simpson. It's like they have such respect, and they're so technically accomplished and brilliant. We've been here for so long, right? But I see the admiration for these artists existing only in these small pockets, right? And like you said, where at the beginning it was these artists who are financially supporting these other artists. Now I see it as almost it's like life support, not life support. That's very, very exaggerative. But when I see people tweeting at, Miss L. Simpson, it's Coldy, it's X Copy, it's Robness, right? It's the people who were there alongside Miss L. Simpson at the beginning who are recognizing the brilliance. I mean,
yeah.
I always hate using Twitter followers or even social media followers as a denotation of success because they're completely non correlated. But you can definitely see where the zeitgeist is based on people's followers, and you see these brilliant artists. And I remember when I was going through the Genesis collection piece by piece, seeing this artwork that consistently hit me as different than anything I'd seen out there,
Yeah.
right? So beautiful. Arc 4G is the perfect example of that. I think their work is absolutely brilliant, and yet there's just this lack of, I don't know, I guess social buzz around this class of artists. It's like everyone has moved on to the next pretty thing. I'm concerned for the pretty things of today. Not that their work will ever not be pretty, but I'm concerned what will happen in terms of their pessimism when 2 years from now the next cycle of collectors, or however long from now the next cycle of collectors comes in, anoints some other people, and then we're having this conversation about people who today are commanding 30 ETH sales once a month.
I mean, the Arc4G story is just like an incredible, incredible story, and the art is phenomenal. And what they were able to do to like support themselves and their family was absolutely brilliant. You know, I had the pleasure of meeting his sister and getting to spend some time with her in Los Angeles, and yeah, I would encourage, if people don't know that artist, definitely to check out that artist and dig in as much as you can to who they are and what they've done.
Yeah, we love Arc4G. Yeah, it's just it's I think it's interesting. I do think we're sitting on a precipice of sorts. Um, because I think it's untenable that the market will continue to only support a handful of artists day by day. Um, I do think that our market is like any other market, and that there is the supply and the demand as its like fundamental features, and the supply is going down. You know, there are just less and less artists that people are interested in collecting. At some point, demand is going to go back up for collecting artists. So you were talking about something, we had mentioned it before we went live, about the new Yuga drop, right? And about like where interest is in this space, where it's going, and how it seems like there's a bit of an identity crisis going on. Would you want to just talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, how far we've fallen, right? How far we've fallen. It was gross to begin with. It's worse now. You know, there was like a real movement of, you know, I'll say it again and again, like artistic sovereignty, empowerment, like market restructuring, the promise of people being able to like make and create and do new things. And then it's like, no, here's like a monkey shitting in an outhouse, and, you know, and like they open a time portal. Like it, when things at the highest level, when this is like representative of the space, that shit just spreads over everything, and you cannot really wash like the stink or smear of that off. Like I'm serious. It like it
Yeah.
affects all the art, and it makes everything look shitty that falls under this umbrella of NFTs. And like, how sustainable is this? And like, is this really what people want? I find that so sad, right? I like, if this is what is being talked about, if this is what is being assigned financial value, like, come on, you know, it's sad.
Well, I mean, I think that we're still in this paradigm, right? You know, what do people want? People still are concerned primarily with money. And I think we can sing until cry till the cows come home about, you know, we're here for the art. You know, that's what matters. And I think a lot of collectors, a lot of artists, a lot of just, you know, figures in this space are constantly talking about it's art first, it's art first. And I think it's just naive to say that, because I don't think art has ever been art first, at least not since like the 70s or 80s, and at least not since I've been alive. You know, when I hear news about art, it's only in terms of price, right? Price or some monumental fuck up, right? Like I'll see a Renaissance painting that in the process of restoration has been totally destroyed, right? Almost like this reality show level of, you know, cynical Schadenfreude, right? When I'll see, you know, Jeff Koons selling a giant balloon animal for $50 million. I don't know what kind of Schadenfreude that is, but I think it's part of the same principle. But I think it's naive to say that this whole thing is unrelated to price.
I mean, I think the artists before, they used to like exist outside of capital. They used to have like free flowing ideas. They would meet in salons, or they would meet in bars, and like and things would be like more wild and free. And it just doesn't feel like anything exists outside of like the purview of capital. Like people go whatever to Burning Man to take their Instagram photo, to do this thing and say they were there. People go to the event to like publicize it and gain influence, which then they can try and use to monetize.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's such a like dearth of authenticity. And
Mm-hmm.
that was what was so attractive in the beginning, is that there was no capital really around the creation. People were really expressing themselves. But once you start to move it into a place like away from one of one art into a place of like open edition, then it so much of like that beauty, that authentic creation just gets kind of reduced.
I have so just admission time for the people, not the Mocha team, but I love Solana. That's where I like got my start in NFTs, is on the Solana ecosystem, and I still do degen hood rat shit there. Um, but I have a buddy who works in the Solana ecosystem, and we were talking about wallets, right? And how any wallet, right, whether it's Phantom on Solana or MetaMask, or I'm sure there are others, but wallets, right? They're made to transact, right? Like that is what, when you first open one of these wallets, it is telling you your balance. It's buy, send, and receive, right? Are the first kind of icons that are actually put forth in front of you, right? I mean, the fact that you can't even view NFTs in MetaMask today, or in the desktop MetaMask, is ridiculous. Like, how long have we been at this? But these wallets, right? The physical tools that we're using to access basically the whole holistic crypto experience, NFT experience, are about transactions, right? And what happens if we change the idea of a wallet from transactions to collections, right? Because there's just no reason. There's no specific reason why owning one of 10,000 Bored Apes is seen as more of a status symbol than owning one of 10,000 open editions by X artist, right? Like, we can say it's because of the individuality or the profile picture, but that's, I think, a tenuous connection at best, and it feels very fad influenced. I guess why are these artworks of any kind not treated as much more status symbols than I think they are, right? Why is the interest in the cartoonish shit? Why is the interest in the, collectible trading card shit? It's not like that in the real world. Out in the physical world, right? You are not cool if you own a bunch of Pokemon cards. I mean, you're cool to me, but you're not cool generally. But if you own, some artistry from an artist whose name I cannot remember, but whose aesthetics I'm sure we all have in mind, that's so much more socially accepted as clout. It's just, I don't know. Like, I understand why people invest in what they do at the moment, or why people put their time and energy into things like whatever Yuga Labs is dropping, because it's going to be worth whatever it's going to be worth. I understand that, of course, but why is it going to be worth more? Where's the impetus?
I mean, I'll say, like, we were really going somewhere as humans, right? COVID came in, it shook this whole thing up. We were meeting in digital spaces. People were like sick of Zoom calls. We wanted like a spatial web. We wanted to be in artistic places. If we were going to be spending so much time in front of a screen, like trapped indoors, we wanted beautiful places, right? And now we've kind of like come back, or maybe normalized, or like have just generally adopted like a fuck it, this thing is staying attitude. And there's not, like, I don't see that as a driver anymore. It just somehow became more about money, right? There was like a real sense that we were like going to enter and be immersed, and people would have like the power to create and share, and these things would be everywhere. They wouldn't be like confined into a wallet, because of course, like, the MetaMask browser extension probably isn't the place you want to be viewing your artwork, like, go into VR, go design that scene. It's way easier than you could ever imagine. Like, those first trips into Somnium were insane. Like, anybody who's done that will tell you, even like just first experiences with VR is incredibly powerful. It induces an incredible amount of like empathy, and there is like a realness and a tactileness and an experience to those artworks, and seeing them like that, or not on your phone, that was really, really powerful, and really was changing.
Well, I think that you're hitting on something that I think about a lot, which is the way that crypto art in general its development is preceding the development of the displays that are needed to make ownership of it feel real.
Yeah.
So I think about, like, the Bored Apes, right? Just the quintessential example. All the PFPs. There's a place to display that, right? Your Twitter picture makes sense as a place to display that. Whatever your social milieu is, like there's the quote unquote utility, right? Is I can put it here and look at it, right? And other people will be able to look at it if I put it here, right? Just the same way that MoMA put a Rafiq Anadol in their lobby, right? Here's a place to look at this art that other people can see it, right? And I think we're going to see in the next couple of years with virtual world development, I think VRM objects are going to have a very similar trajectory. Virtual objects are going to have a similar trajectory.
Let's talk about profile pictures, because I've been thinking about this a lot, right? Like Web 2 was entirely take the person, make them static, and make that person a personal brand, right? This was like a total importation of just Web 2 thinking, right? Like you have to choose your profile picture and then you have to like stay that person, right? I think that is incredibly antithetical to Web3 thinking. And I think, there's a generation younger than us that is like fed up with like individuality associated with personal brand. They want fluidity of identity. I think like we feel this too. Like we want to be able to change. We want to be able to like have opinions, have expressions. We don't want to be like trapped into this one thing. And I think that the PFP phenomenon also was like incredibly deleterious to people like becoming more of themselves. And suddenly they had like the ease and the comfort to say, no, we're in this community together. And because we're all like our own virtuous marketing cycle, we're going to make it. We're all going to make it. Like,
so it's this really interesting social experiment of sorts happening on Solana, and I promise I'm not just pumping Solana's bags. There is interesting stuff that happens over there for the ETH people listening, but there's this guy or gal, there's a person, LT Lollipop is what they are on Twitter, and there's a project. One of the first NFT projects on Solana was called Solana Monkey Business. It's pixelated monkeys. I'm sure you've seen them. They're very cute. There's a huge disconnect between the community of people who own them and the developers, who seem, at least by some viewpoints, to be just siphoning all the royalties away from the project and just basically cashing out, right? A lot of animosity. So this person has been buying these SMB NFTs and just burning them outright, right? Spending lots of money and just burning them outright, including their own profile picture. And had this thread about, I don't need to own this NFT, right? Because the NFT is actually a visual identifier of me, right? So it doesn't matter that anybody owns this piece, right? That it even exists, because people identify, this orange-skinned monkey wearing a sombrero as me, right? And it's basically making a lot more conceptual the link between a person and their profile picture. It takes the ownership out of the thing, and it puts the, I guess, onus of ownership on the community that is viewing that sense of ownership.
I mean, people forget that like when CryptoPunks started pumping, Robin has bought one and burned one. It was like not very cool within like the circle of artists to associate your name and self with wealth. And it's, somehow like that won. Somehow that won. The idea that like, yeah, I don't know, crazy.
So somebody somewhere is going to create an oral history of CryptoPunks, right? Tracing who bought them, where they went, Robness burning it. Our Untitled XYZ, who works at the museum, I think he bought 3 when they launched and then gave one as a wedding present.
Claimed, yeah.
Or claimed rather, sorry. But I imagine there are all of these stories. I wonder how much wealth and influence in Web3 today came from the arbitrary transfer of these NFTs before they were anything.
Man,
2018.
Moderat sent me like a 1 of 50 edition of Xcopy. There was like, what's that worth now? Like $40,000. He sent it to like 20 people just one day, randomly.
If Moderats is listening, he should feel free to send me 1 of 50 Xcopy as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool, you know? It was civil. It was nice. Yeah.
Well, I think it seems, hearing you talk about it, hearing some of the artists talk about it, a lot more communal, a lot more community based. I think people talk a lot about community these days, but it's this, there's a very, it doesn't seem like there's a general community. It seems like there are communities around a specific artist or around a specific project, and they're very internally motivated.
Yeah, it was centered. It was everybody really just like trying to do this thing together, right?
Mhm.
So, and then of course once the thing kind of happened, well, I'm sure there's a ton of disparate opinions now of to like how do we proceed and how do we steward this and how do we, and people, I'm sure most people don't even want to deal with the fallout,
Mhm.
right? It is I you cannot, people ask me what I do. I don't tell people what I do. You know how like terrible that is? That's the first question you always get in America. What do you do?
It's true. Hate that question.
That question sucks. Stop asking that question, people.
And I think these things seep out of where they are in our community structure and into our, like, how we view the world. Like, I think the fact that MetaMask is mostly transactional, I think that's important for how we view the space. And when people ask, what do you do, as the primary identifier of who you are, we internalize that, right? Um,
Yeah.
I think that those things become more than just conversational nuance. They become, our perspective of the world. Um, yeah,
It's identity formation tied to capital again. You know, it's like how do you earn your living? I'm going to instantly judge you based on that.
yeah. Well, we've been talking for 45 minutes. I think we should pick up our discussion of identity based and cultural capital next week. I do have some questions for you though before we go.
Yeah, hit
You
me.
got it. Who you got for the football games this weekend,
Oh, who's in it? Who's playing? You know, I called
bro?
that Jacksonville comeback. That was tight. Who do I
Did
got
you?
for the? I did. I
All right,
did.
Jacksonville versus Kansas City. Who you got?
Kansas City. That one's easy.
Eagles Giants. Who you got?
I'm gonna go.
Uh,
I'm gonna go with Untitled Eagles. I like the Eagles all year.
all right, 49ers Cowboys.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Cowboys.
And then Bengals Bills in a battle of the bees.
I love the Bungles.
All right. Well, you heard him here. First Colborne Bell's NFL picks for the divisional round of the
Those,
playoffs.
yeah. Somebody put $100 on that 14 parlay.
Yeah, and then give us a cut.
Right, exactly.
We will
That's a
not
winner.
reimburse if you lose, but we will take a cut if you win. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Colborne, you got anything else to say to the people?
No, this was fun, man. Thanks for putting this together.
Excellent.
We'll be
Well,
back.
next week we'll be going through our tax returns. So stay tuned. And we love you very much.
See ya.